Hello and welcome to the Irish Examiner Property and Home Live event brought to you in partnership with AIB. Now our first panel is hosted by our very own Tommy Barker. He's the property editor here at the Irish Examiner and he'll speak to Catherine McAuliffe of Savills Cork and AIB mortgage advisor Garrod O'Shea. They're going to talk about the options open to first-time buyers across Munster and indeed if now is actually the right time to be entering the market. But just before we do that, we're going to hear from our reader, Duncan. He's shared his experience and his frustrations, which are all very understandable when you listen to him, about trying to actually get on the property ladder in the first place.
Hello, my name's Duncan Stocks. I have a question for the panel, but first of all, I've been asked just to give a little bit of background as to our experience of house hunting here in East Cork. We've been renting in East Cork for 2 years. That's me, my wife and 3 daughters, and we want to buy in the area. We've viewed and bid on multiple properties and been outbid every single time. Quite often the bid prices have gone to 100,000 over the asking price. It's very frustrating, very disheartening. We have actually found another property in the meantime, so we're very happy. We haven't paid too much over the asking price. But my question to the panel will be, do they think we're right to buy at the minute? Obviously, we are in a different situation, but if we still had our rental property, would we be right to buy or should we wait for 2 years or even 1 year? Do they think more stuff will come onto the market? And do they think the new housing initiative, will that impact house prices in the short term, or is it just a ruse to get themselves re-elected? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tommy Barker. I'm property editor with the Irish Examiner, and I'm really pleased to be part of this event today, and I'm glad you're with us. We've a really interesting question coming in from a reader who's just on the point of buying a house. His sale agreed. And I think what he says in this little video clip you've seen kind of encapsulates where people's nerves and fears are in the current market. It's a very peculiar market, and I'm going to just ask Catherine McAuliffe from Savills first to pick up a little bit on that question, and then we'll talk to Garrod from AIB Home Advisor. Catherine, Duncan's experience, he's making a commitment, but he's not sure he's doing the right thing. Is he doing the right thing?
Yes, Tommy, I suppose Duncan's experience is a scenario that we're seeing more and more often, obviously, in the market, purely driven by the fact that we've such a shortage of houses and such a demand from, we've so many buyers and we just don't have enough houses. So it is unfortunately a situation people are finding themselves in. But really, it's about finding a house that you like and want to live in. I think that's the best advice that you can give any buyer. And if they can afford the repayments every month, well, then I think, yes, it is the right time to buy.
So he shouldn't really be jumping at anything on the basis it's better to be on the property ladder than not in at all. Should he be wondering, should I buy now, maybe trade later? Would that be good advice to some buyers or any buyers?
Well, I think if you're buying a home for yourself, I think, first of all, you need to be sure you're going to be happy in that home. There's no point in buying something you don't really want.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get caught up in the market and the frenzy that is the market at the moment.
Yeah.
So I think the advice is to sort of take a step back, decide, is it where you want to live? Is the house what you want to live in? And if you can afford it, well, then it is the right time.
Yeah. Even if you're paying rent and your rent is more than your mortgage, sometimes was there a case where it might be just better to have anything? Is that bad advice? Is that panicking?
I think it is panic buying. And I mean, I have seen it in the market where people, like Duncan says, bidding 100,000 over the asking price. But often, actually, we've actually come to a situation where we've 2 buyers who bid against each other because they really want something, and then they decide, hang on a second, this is far too much money, and it has kind of backed down again. So there is panic buying there, and I don't recommend it.
Okay. Garrod, your own experience, dealing with customers coming in looking for a mortgage. One, there's the mortgage journey they have to go on, the borrowing, the threshold they can go to, and then you must see when they see prices going crazily high above. What solace can you give? And
yeah. I suppose I'd echo the thoughts, Catherine, in the fact that I suppose if you can afford the property and you love the property and it's going to be a long-term family home, for example, then probably it is the right time to buy that home. From the perspective of affording it, I suppose it's not really a bubble created by credit at the moment. the central bank guidelines in terms of the general 3.5 times your gross salary will apply. So you are able to afford it if you have the additional funds yourself and it is the property you want to buy. Then I suppose the advice is, there's probably no point in waiting and holding off for something special to happen in the market in the next 6 months to a year, house prices coming down. So yeah, it's usually frustrating for customers. We see that every day, just trying to find the properties. But no, I think it's fair to buy the property if you see it long term as your family home and you can afford it.
Okay. Picking up on another point that Duncan made as well, I think he mentioned the government initiative Housing for All, and whether people should be taking solace and that will improve supply. It clearly is a very big plan. It's very ambitious, Catherine. When do you see it starting to feed in the first positives?
It's a huge document, absolutely. But I mean, one of their pathways is to improve supply of housing, and there is no doubt that will actually happen. It's actually how long it will take for us to see that impact. I think it potentially, it's probably 2 to 3 years before you really see some serious change in the supply. Because, you've got the same developers building private houses and building public sector houses. So there are only so many builders there as well. So I think until you start to see the supply coming on, you'll probably continue to see some price increases for another couple of years anyway.
Garrod, I mean, one of the measures coming in that nobody really knows a lot about in Housing for All is this talk about shared equity. We don't really know what's involved in the parameters, but you've done some study on it. How do you think it's going to operate?
Correct. And the banks at the moment where they are is they're only starting to have the conversation with the Department of Housing and the BPFI around what it'll look like. So the details, as you said, they're not there. But what that will do is probably bring more customers to the market in terms of being able to afford properties. The shared equity, in terms of what we see an awful lot, is you'll get your mortgage from the bank, you'll have your 10% deposit, you still can't afford the house, so there's additional funding required. And the early talks, that's going to bridge that gap between the mortgage amount, your own funds available. So what will happen there is you can see more customers being ready to purchase the properties, but as we know, that'll only be really solved as supply comes onto the market. So its supply really is still going to be the major concern there in terms of how quickly that supply will grow.
So, Catherine, if it brings more people into the market, is that going to make things even tighter again, or will they come on stream as supply starts to loosen maybe? I
think supply will increase, but also I think some of the buyers, all of the buyers now are trying to buy private houses, whereas actually some of them will qualify more than likely for a shared equity house or for an affordable purchase house. So there's a couple of different incentives inside in that plan, including, of course, the Help to Buy scheme, which is there at the moment as well.
Do you think that will be extended in the budget? It's only 2 weeks away now.
Yeah, I do think it probably will be for a while. It is mentioned quite a bit in the plan, so I see it definitely being there for another year. I could be completely wrong now, but we'll find out fairly soon.
Interestingly, the Examiner, prior to this event, did a survey of auctioneers in the business, and most of them, obviously I think most of them said it should be extended. 14% said no, they weren't in favour of being extended. But nobody was in favour of being extended for a year, and the majority said at least 2, if not 3 years. So I think certainty means an awful lot, both for buyers and developers, and we've always done things year to year.
Yeah, I think, to implement the plan that they have now, I think they need to keep it as well as the other incentives, because some people are using that Help to Buy as their deposit to buy their house, because they just can't get to the point where they have to save 40 or 50,000. Yeah. So it is helping, definitely.
Garrod, your own experience of people coming in, and how important is Help to Buy for them at the moment?
Help to Buy, I suppose it's very positive for customers. When it was initially introduced, you do see an awful lot of savings at the moment, especially over lockdown, maybe the last 18 months. So customers who are lucky enough to have found properties, maybe some properties have been delayed, they've actually saved an awful lot. Help to Buy is great, but if it could be extended out to, I suppose, support people who aren't just buying new homes, that would be brilliant for the overall market. So there's a couple of things, the deposit is one side of it that customers look for. There's the huge part of it from our customers is looking at the rates, the long-term value and things like that. So customers will also, there's more than just the Help to Buy and initial incentives. They want to know about long-term value when they're looking at mortgages as well. And I think looking at a blend between your fixed rates and your variable rates, things like that comes into it just as much as Help to Buy, and as well as the customer experience. So things like the the mortgage portal, being able to help customers through that journey, because what's really key we find with customers is they actually have the properties now. Things go really, really slowly until a certain point, and you go to the letter of offer and you want to draw down, and you want great transparency there. So that's just as important as all those incentives. So things like the My Mortgage app, where you're kept informed all the way along the journey. You can contact your mortgage advisor, the fulfilment team, when you're about to draw down. They're just as important as those incentives that are out there at the moment.
Catherine, the Help to Buy, it only applies obviously to new homes, but you must have people kind of saying if only it could apply to second-hand homes. There's a big stock of second-hand homes that doesn't get the same push, and there's a lot of vacant and empty houses, and houses that maybe would be brought to the market if people had more borrowing capability for them. Do you think would it improve the second-hand market and bring a bit more justice and a bit more choice for buyers also?
Yeah, certainly for the first-time buyers, I think it would bring more justice, but I think as well, that new homes are more expensive than second-hand homes, sort of generally speaking, unless it's a very new home that's getting resold. So sometimes it's worth considering a second-hand home to buy it cheaper. And yeah, you will have to invest money in it over time to bring it up to the same BER rating, to give you lower running costs again. But you won't have to lay out all of that money initially, So yet it would be great for the first-time buyers to have that across the board, but I still think first-time buyers of new homes are getting very disappointed a lot because we get 20 houses to sell and there's maybe 300 people that want to buy them. So those people, I think, should look at second-hand homes as well. Just, 'cause there are other options out there.
When you get people coming into it, they're fairly set one way or the other on new homes or second-hand homes. Do you see people being swayed? That maybe new homes, it's more of a fixed price than second-hand homes. So at least if they can get a deposit down, they know they're going to buy it. There's price certainty. Is that an issue for people?
To be honest, it's not. There's a lot of uncertainty around like what it'll cost to do up a second-hand home, because they know they're going to put that investment into it. But in many cases, yes, they will come in if there's a new housing project going on the market. They'll come in and say, I want to get ready for that. They know when they have to be in to bid on it. But after that, they're happy to look at second-hand housing just as much, and we see the uplift in the purchase of second-hand homes as well, and we'll see a lot of lending around, renovating homes and things like that, and there's various options there for top-ups on mortgages and things, and green rates and green personal loans and things like that, which are very useful as well. So in general, they're flexible, customers are flexible, they want to find a home, and that's what they're lacking.
Yeah. And again, we did a survey earlier, and back up the top of it, 100% of people said location is still the driver, but second on that, which wouldn't have been so high on the list before, was access to outdoor space. Catherine, what kind of priorities do you see people looking for at the moment when they're buying houses, particularly second-hand houses?
Yeah, I think certainly a second living space now to use as a home office, or we've actually seen a huge change in design of, say, 3-bed house. Before, you just had your straight box 3-bed semi with one living room, one kitchen, come dining room. Now, most of them have a second living space at the back of them. And yeah, everybody's looking for a home office. So if you can afford it, buy a 4-bedroom house and use the smallest bedroom as your office. But, they're the kind of trends of 4-bed semi if you can afford it, and then 3-bed semi with an extension to the rear. They're the two preferences on the new home side.
A couple of years ago, I think we were having conversations. You were saying people were buying the 4-bed semi as against the 3-bed semi. They did have the options. And obviously people who were in that catchment at the time were completely at ease, working from home with the extra room. But right now, with the way prices are going, people are kind of a bit more stuck buying something smaller. So where do you see, will there be a property ladder in 2 years' time when maybe the effects of COVID die off? Will people buy and look to trade? And that's back to a question we had a little bit earlier. But
yeah, I mean, as I say, I think the houses are designed a lot better now, so you can probably stay in them longer than 2 years. You still have, say, if you have a 3-bed semi with an extension to the rear, that that can do you for life, actually, for a lot of people. But yeah, I suppose if you look back 2 years ago, you could buy a 4-bed semi for average, I would say, in Cork for about 350, 360. And now they are pushed up to about 400,000. So certainly they're pushed out of people's reach, and they will now be, I suppose, encouraged to buy more 3-bed semi. But I think they can stay in those houses for longer. It doesn't necessarily mean they will have to. It's not like getting stuck in an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 children that had happened in the previous cycle. So I think that's a little bit different, and they all have outdoor spaces as well.
Gerard, if people are pretty much borrowing to the pin of their collar to get started, how worried should they be about being able to move on in a little bit of time? And how does the bank feel about the central bank restrictions, loan to value, multiples, things like that? Would you be happy to lend at higher multiples?
There is that side of it. I mean, the central bank guidelines are there, and they're probably helpful at the moment in the market. If you were creating a credit bubble now, and house prices would only increase further, really, I think the shared equity schemes, that's a good way of kind of bridging that side of it in the future, perhaps. But going back to Catherine's point there about the homes at the moment, a big factor now as well is kind of energy ratings of the houses. Like, climate change is huge for customers. And that's something that they're coming in and they're looking at, really, in terms of the longevity of the house, that they find they want to bring it up to the better energy ratings and things like that, because that's a lot more important to people now than maybe it was 5-10 years ago as well, which is great. But I suppose there's things in to support that. Green rates, green lending is coming into the banking market in a big way, and we'd be a leader in that side of it too. But that's a huge factor for customers at the moment.
Catherine, if you're selling a property to a buyer of a second-hand home and it needs work, what advice can you give people? I mean, 20 years ago, people bought and they lived quite happily, and then they did things up. And now the cliche is, the millennials and the snowflakes. They want it all, and they want comfortable furniture. They want to get straight in. Not everyone's in that position. Do you see people going to a certain point, buying a second-hand house, and then panicking and saying, hang on a second now, there's shortages in building trades, prices have gone through the roof. Can I move in at the moment and live with, a house that an 80-year-old person lived in, and do the work in 2 or 3 years' time when things settle, if things settle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the practical advice that I would be giving them. Normally I start off with, when I bought my house. So, starting with concrete floors and waiting to get your 3-piece suite for a year and that sort of thing. So, look, I do think people are willing to do that, and they are more invested in how can they improve their home, how can they bring it up to that good BRR rating. There are grants available to do that as well. I know you still have a fair outlay, but I think, people are willing to do that, definitely, to, we can live here comfortably for a few years and then we'll do the work over time. So I think people are more prepared to do that again, definitely.
And Gerard, if somebody comes into you for a mortgage and they're buying a second-hand house that needs work, and they say to you, look, if we can move in the moment, can we come back and talk to you about a top-up mortgage? What options have people to kick the can down the road a little bit, just to buy in a location they really like, a house they'd be happy in, but they just can't afford or get a builder to do the work right now? So,
once it's in a livable condition and they can move into it, without doing the renovations right away, that's no problem at all. They will do that. They'll come back to us then. You are reassessed as a mortgage applicant again to see if you can borrow more money at that stage. So the advice you give them really is make sure you kind of stay away from additional personal debt at that stage, because that's calculated into it. So you're trying to tell people this isn't the end of your mortgage journey. So make sure if you can stay away from additional personal debt at that stage before you come back for the top up. That would be a key thing to get across to that customer. But absolutely, it's the norm at the moment, to be honest.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gerard. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you to Gerard O'Shea from AIB, Catherine McAuliffe from Savills, and I look forward to the contributions from the panels coming on later in the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With our green personal loan, AIB is lending today to save tomorrow. We pledge to do more.
Thanks a million to Tommy, Catherine and Garrod. Some really interesting insights there. And now, as many homeowners debate whether they should trade up or extend, Alan Healy, our Irish Examiner Business Hub editor, will get advice from Anne O'Mahony of Sherry Fitzgerald and Kieran McCarthy, the presenter of RT's Cheap Irish Homes. Also, we're going to be joined remotely by Mr. Tom Halpin from the SEAI, and he'll be talking to us about some of the grants that are available to improve that energy efficiency of your home.
Well, thank you, Esther, for that introduction. Yes, I'm delighted to be here at the Property and Home live event. I'm joined by Anne O'Mahony of Sherry Fitz, builder Kieran McCarthy, and Tom Halpin from the SEAI is joining us here remotely. So we hope to have some exciting questions and insights into the current state of the market when it comes to trading up and buying second-hand homes, but also building new homes as well, and also what implications and what grants and availabilities there are out there from the SEAI when it comes to upgrading homes. So as I said, delighted to be here. I think, Anne, I might go to my first question to yourself. We've heard in the first panel there about the current state of the new homes market and the challenges that a lot of buyers are facing in that market. Would you have a view from an estate agent's perspective of what the trading up market, the second home market is like currently?
There's no doubt it's very challenging. It's difficult for those who are looking to trade up in the current market. I suppose we all remember the 8th of June last year when we came out of the first lockdown. Nobody knew where the world was going to go. Nobody knew where the market was going to go. But the gates opened and people came and people bought. Again, I suppose the biggest challenge for people is choice. It's lack of stock. We've been having that conversation for a number of years, but me, 25 years selling properties in Cork, I don't think I've ever seen stock levels so low, which creates that difficulty in itself that there's very, very little choice out there for people to trade up to. People are very location specific, and again, Cork is a small city, the surrounding areas are small, so choice is very, very limited. So absolutely, there's no doubt it is extremely challenging for people at the minute.
And are ye seeing this, that we kind of hear anecdotally, this evidence of people who may be changing location because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that they're relocating to more rural areas, perhaps moving out of urban areas?
Absolutely. I think everybody took stock over the last 18, 19 months. You know, everybody reevaluated their lives, their lifestyles. I suppose traditionally people would have lived near their work, but now that's not so important. So people are tending to move towards their lives. So they have looked at, like, where are my family, you know, where are my support systems, where do I want to be? And we do find that people are moving out slightly, but what we also find, I suppose, is that people are moving towards stronger communities. So those who aren't moving out of the city, they're moving to the older, more mature areas like the Ballinlocks, the Model Farm Roads, the Glasheenes, the Sundays Well, you know, where there is a very, very good, strong community, good schools, etc., and good support systems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've seen in the Saturday edition of the Irish Examiner and online that's been repeated across all of the Southern Ireland, really, when it comes to, you know, all sorts of various locations across Limerick, Kerry and Waterford as well. Are there people coming from further afield again? I mean, are we talking about expats returning to Ireland? Are they having an impact on that second-hand market?
They are, and that's an interesting one, actually, because I suppose we all moved to the virtual world somewhat and count on technology again since the beginning of COVID, and that's nearly made it easier for those who do want to come home from abroad to relocate. I suppose historically somebody could jump on a plane in London on Saturday morning, view a property on a Saturday afternoon, be back in London on Saturday evening. But the virtual world has opened it up. And again, it's very much people who, they're taking stock. They're saying, okay, you know, what am I doing over here in London? What am I doing in Dubai? Could I work from Cork? Could I work from Ireland? Could I work from home in general? So absolutely, we are seeing that as an impact. And of course, that's creating more of a demand in the market. So where stock is low, demand is rising. So again, never the twain shall meet.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned some of those sort of older traditional areas or parts of Cork City. I suppose it's the same across much of the country. Is there that desire now, and maybe some people listening this evening might have that view, that whereas perhaps they were considering a new home and that mightn't be an option for them at the moment, that they may reconsider and buy an older home, maybe built back in the 50s and the 60s, and with the view of renovating, upgrading and extending?
We're seeing that big time, really. We are seeing that. And again, it's in the more mature areas where people are looking at the 1940s, 1950s, three-bedroom semi-detached with the garage, that typically they would have been on decent enough sites back in the day, so there are options to extend. And again, if you drive around Cork City, you'll see the double-storey extension going on, you'll see that lovely, beautiful box being built onto the back of the house, you know, the Home Office, etc., etc. Kieran will be able to discuss that more with you, I suppose. Really, you know, that's his forte. He's been in it quite a while.
Yeah, on that matter, Kieran. So, I mean, you know, as a builder, I suppose, how have you seen the last sort of 2 years change due to COVID? Are there more people who are now looking, you know, contacting builders like yourselves, looking to buy an older home and upgrading it significantly or extending it?
Yeah, I mean, you do get a lot of people looking to renovate an old house, and you get people who might have access to a site on a family farm or whatever, and it might have been a kind of a long-term plan, and they haven't kind of pushed the button on it up to now. But I suppose the one big trend that we've certainly seen outside of COVID, or as a result of COVID, is People, as Anne said, like there's a huge kind of lifestyle change. People are there's a much more value on your kind of your immediate surroundings. So the size of your garden, the size of your house. What can you? I mean, we're hoping we're at the end of lockdowns, but I suppose we all got to appreciate our immediate surroundings and what value they have or what value they would ideally have. So a lot of people are reimagining how their life will be, and something that might have been a 7 or 8 year plan is now becoming a 1 or 2 year plan. There's a kind of a fast forward button been pressed on kind of life plans and kind of a general reset button really. And we've come to look at the world differently, I suppose. Yeah.
Sure. For a person who may be listening this evening, or a couple or a family of that, who are divided between perhaps buying an existing home or building a new home, from a builder's perspective, and I know there's architects and surveyors and there's a lot of elements to it, but what are some of the considerations you think that they should take in mind from a builder's perspective if they're going to go out there and build a new home, maybe acquire a site?
But I suppose if you're building a new home, you can design it exactly the way you want it, budget allowing, and when during the construction phase, there's only a small amount of kind of cost risk, budget risk, which is really the unknowns in the ground. Are you going to hit rock? Are you going to hit clay? Will a normal foundation do, or would you need a raft foundation? If you're renovating an old house, there's a myriad of issues you can have. If you're extending, you still have the issues in the ground. When the extension is tying into the existing building, what are you tying into? What condition is the existing block work in? What conditions are the existing foundations in? What condition is the old roof in, the old timbers primarily? So you've an awful lot more risk. And I suppose with an existing house, there are, you can only redesign so much of it feasibly. So you are tied a little bit to the existing design of the house. Although you may take the view that, if you're renovating an existing house, you might have access to a better location because, building a new house tends to be on the outskirts of the city or out in the countryside, whereas you might take a view that some of the better locations in around suburbia and the kind of more mature areas of the city,
Very good. Tom Halpin, delighted you can join us remotely here from the SEAI. Of course, your organisation helps a lot homeowners with upgrades. I think a lot of people listening this evening will be looking at homes, perhaps older homes that may have very low BER ratings. They're not the most energy efficient. Could you give us an outline of where your organisation could come in and help on that?
Okay, thanks very much for having me, Alan. I'm delighted to join this evening's event. So most people, when they're buying an older home, will have gotten a BER rating with the home, and people might be getting a D or an E or an F, and indeed around half of Ireland's existing homes are D rated or lower. Now, a D-rated home will use about 4 times as much energy as a modern new build home. That is, if the person is keeping it to the same comfort level. But what we find is most people maybe pare back a little bit to keep the energy bills low. And what we're saying these days is that people should discover a new world of comfort. A warm, comfortable and a healthy home is an absolute entitlement for most people. And it's achievable nowadays through external wall insulation, upgrading windows, improving the heating system. And SEAI provides a range of government-funded grants to support people, and there's different ways of going about it.
I think you and I were discussing before as well, Tom, that so often, and I think we'll all agree on this, that a person who buys a new home, they may set their eyes on the kitchen and are remodeling the bathroom, but of course there are more important elements almost to consider than that, isn't there?
Well, this is it. Like when a person buys a home, you see so many older homes being bought and they're being repurposed for the new family that's moving in. People are considering maybe adding additional floor space, and Kieran mentioned that. They might be doing a bit of reconfiguring of the floor space. But then there's a big focus on some of the aesthetic changes. They're converting bathrooms to wet rooms, or they're adding, changing the kitchen around. And there's a substantial amount of money goes into those. And what we're saying to people is, when you're doing those sort of renovations and refurbishment jobs, don't forget about the energy efficiency upgrades, because a lot of the work you're doing will actually be accessing the points where you're going to be doing the changes anyway. The heating upgrades are going to be changing the walls, so you might as well upgrade them. And the main thing we say to people is, first of all, do it well, do it once and do it well. Don't scrimp on the efficiency side of it. If you're changing around or working on the roof, go for it. Go for as much insulation as you can in the roof, as much insulation as you can in the walls. If you're going for high-performance double-glazed windows. Think about high-performance triple-glazed windows. If you're changing the heating system, go for the highest efficiency you can, or better still, go for renewables, go for a heat pump, go for solar thermal. All of these investments, they're quite considerable, but of course, first of all, there's government-funded grants to support you, which there isn't to invest in your kitchen or your wet room. And the great thing with energy upgrades is they pay for themselves. A kitchen upgrade doesn't have a payback. A wet room doesn't have a payback period. A home energy upgrade pays for itself over a period of time and then continues saving. So even if you have to borrow to do additional money to do those works, your repayments on the upgrade part, the energy upgrade part, are effectively lowered by the savings you make.
I see. Excellent. Kieran, from your point of view, if one of the listeners is looking at one of these older homes, when they're touring it, what should they keep an eye out for? What are some things, the quality of the current building, but also if they're looking to extend, what should they be kind of keeping their eye out for?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing I always look for as a kind of a litmus test of the quality of an old home or its condition and how well it's been holding out the elements and whatever is the condition of the timber, right? Because if you see timber that's in great condition if there's a timber floor on the ground floor, that's a very good sign because it means the building has been holding out water, and particularly on the first floor, if the timber floor is in good condition, it's been holding out water from the roof. So the timber is always a good starting point. Beyond that, I never get hugely enamored by, it's beautifully finished and whatever, because you need to consider, if you want to, if it has a D energy rating and you want to upgrade that, how are you going to do that? Are you going to have to dry line it? In which case, a lot of the existing finishes were going to have to be removed so you can dry line it. So you need to get a sense of, what level of BR is it currently at being sold? And how are you going to improve that? So how are you going to insulate it? The attic is a more straightforward situation where you can put quilt insulation in there. What conditioning is the existing boiler in? What conditioning is the existing fuse board in? Because these are kind of background events that you mightn't see on a quick walk around. But if you have a very old boiler and you have to put in a new boiler, that could mean you might have to put in new heating pipes throughout, which means half the floors might need to go up and everything else. Yeah. So you could be going backwards before you go forward. So I'd certainly have a look at some of those background events as well.
And on this issue of people who may be looking to buy a home and to renovate it, what kind of does that play in their search for a property? Do you see a lot of people in that sphere who are coming to you looking for a property, but they also have to factor in the cost of an extension?
Yeah, I suppose there's two camps. Kind of younger people, maybe in the late 20s, early 30s, might just want to come into a turnkey home and will pay a bit of a premium for that, whether it's a new house or a house that's already been renovated. There's a lot of people as well who maybe a bit older will kind of look at it and go, I know that no matter what house I buy, I'm going to have to put my own stamp on it because we have our own family situation. And I know the way our family live at this stage, so we're going to need to remodel it a bit. So they might be going in and buying a house, but they might be putting €100,000 aside to renovate and extend. And I suppose what used to be a kind of a €75,000 budget for doing that kind of work, it could be nearly doubled now. Because everything in the past, renovating was getting the new boiler and a bit of insulation and the new kitchen, and now it's extending out the back and having the open plan space and maybe putting on the room on the first floor and God knows what. So there's a lot more structural rejigging to be done on a house to create all those kind of open plan spaces,
And are you kind of seeing that mirrored as well on your side of the business, that people are coming to ye with, mortgage approval for a certain amount, but also obviously wanting to have resources as well to do a significant extension to existing properties when they're buying an established home?
Absolutely. I suppose first and foremost, if somebody's trading up, we would meet them as an advisor. So you throw everything out on the table. Cost is key. People will concentrate on location, but really it's the cost, it's the finances to see can you get to the end of your journey. But I suppose, in fairness, people who are trading up, they're not thinking short term. They're thinking a lifetime, that this is their home for life. So they will stretch themselves because they're saying, okay, I'm not going to be gone out of here in 5, 7, 10 years' time. I'm hoping that my kids will grow up here, they'll end up going out through college here, etc., 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 and might even retire here. So, yes, cost is absolutely a factor, and it is a conversation that people are having because everybody knows build costs have gone up, produce costs have gone up. You know, there's uncertainty as to the length of time that refurbishment will take. You know, there's a lot more uncertainty than there would have been 2 years ago, and people are taking that into consideration. But it's a judgment call, really, that if it's for you, you will put up with the stress, you will put up with the pressure, and if you could beam yourself forward, you'll see it is actually worth it. So they're facing the challenges and they're facing them well.
Very good. Yeah, one thing I might actually, Anne mentions that people are taking a longer term view of their houses and kind of future proofing. Like a lot of people our age are actually saying, look, I might like a downstairs bedroom because I mightn't always be able to access the first story. Yeah. And that's outside of things like home offices, that's a real growing trend because people don't really want to move house anymore.
No, they don't. Their home is their home, and they are very much future proof. And we're seeing more of that, and you're seeing more of the downstairs wet room, etc. You know, and the one that can be converted into a bedroom. So they're investing for life, not just for the next few years.
And I suppose the other thing is like when we were growing up, we grew up in a park in Middleton. And there was always someone adding an extension onto their house, and then 3 years later they were adding something else. There was always a bit of an ongoing refurb going on throughout. Whereas people nowadays, they go in, they do it all in one go. They do the energy work and the new boiler or the air to water system or the ventilation or whatever it is. It's all in one go, and then they park it forever. So they're thinking of the longer plan in the house as well.
They future-proof their lives, really.
One of you mentioned working from home and a home office, and part of the sign-up process for this event, we did invite you listening this evening to submit some questions, and we have a question now on video from Laura, who's recently or is in the market for a new home, and she has a question which I think might be suited towards you, Kieran, if we can have Laura's question now.
Hello, we are in the process of selling our home. We have another new property being built which won't be ready till next June, and we're exploring the possibility of putting a home office in the back garden for my work. So I need to see clients, and I would rather them not coming into the house as such. We'd rather keep it home-work balance. My question is, are we constricted in the type and size of the home office we would put in the back garden due to it being in an estate, or is there any considerations we need to look at for that? Thank you.
Well, a home office in your back garden, what would you suggest? What are the steps that they might want to consider?
Well, I'm assuming this lady is... What you said, she's having a house built. There's a builder building a house for her in a housing.
I think it may be an established house, actually. I think, but if just the consideration of if she was to build that.
So if you're looking to build a home office in a park, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, either way, the planning legislation and guidelines are the same. Like a home office, what people are typically doing, there isn't specific planning guidelines for a home office. What people are typically doing is there is exempted development provision for a garage.
Okay.
Right, in your back garden. You don't have to go for planning for a garage if the garage is no more than 4 meters tall on the ridge on a pitched roof, and if it's no more than 25 square meters and it's in the back garden, and there's a few other minor regulations around it as well. So what people are typically doing is they're building a garage within the confines of those parameters, and I suppose they're kind of fitting it out. They're insulating it and putting windows in it. And whereas it is, I suppose, technically a garage or a store, people are probably using it as a home office. So you can probably move in around those kind of parameters in that instance, you know.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Kieran. I mean, you mentioned insulation there. Tom, if I could go back to you as well. Another kind of question that some of those people suggested was just how much of a jump of a BER can people make, or are they making currently, and what kind of, just what value that will add to your quality of life?
Okay, that's a great question. First of all, we've already supported over 450,000 homeowners to get upgrades, and that includes about a third of those homes were free energy upgrades through our Energy Poor scheme. But most of those homes, they got part upgrades. They added wall insulation or attic insulation. We're now really driving people towards the big prize, and that big prize is to get people up to a B2. It's still a tad below where the new build regulations would be, but it's a super comfortable home, really healthy home, much lower energy bills. And that's possible. You take an E or a D or even an F-rated home, what you're talking about there is adding wall insulation, attic insulation, upgrading the heating system probably to a heat pump, and you may have to add windows. It's not always the case, but it depends always on what you want to do and also what you're doing anyway as part of the refurbishment work. The key there is as well, not only have you all those benefits of comfort and cost savings, but if you're selling a house, a higher BER actually has, and this work has been analysed, a higher BER actually adds to the sales price of a house, and every point on the scale adds about 1% to the sales price of a house. It also typically will increase the pace of sale of a house. If you're selling two houses in an estate and they're ostensibly the same, but one is a B-rated and one is a D-rated, well, the B-rated will just be more attractive and more appealing and will sell faster than the D-rated home. So sellers and buyers need to be aware of this. But a B is very possible. You can then add, by the way, you can add things like solar photovoltaic for generating electricity. You can add mechanical ventilation systems, and you might then begin to tip into the A rating.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, that's excellent. I'd like to thank my panel, Tom Halpin from the SEAI, Ciara McCarthy, well-known builder, excellent quality across Munster, Anna Manny from Sherry Fitzgerald. We hope that you found all of our contributions today quite informative, and we hope you look forward to the next panel coming up shortly.
At AIB, we back belief with a fair mortgage, which is why we've lowered our fixed rates again. Starting from just 2.35% for lower loan-to-value mortgages, available to both new and existing customers. AIB, we back belief.
Thanks, Alan, Tom, Kieran and Anne. Now remember, you can make your home improvements a sustainable choice with AIB Green Personal Loan, helping to reduce emissions and also reduce your long-term heating costs. You can find out more at aib.ie. And now for our final panel, and the one I've been really looking forward to, Eve Kelleher, the Irish Examiner Interiors Editor, is joined by Jen Sheahan and Carol O'Callaghan to look at the current trends and how to make the most of that existing space you have already. Now, Jen's Dublin cottage, packed full of personality. You'll remember it scooped the title of RT's Home of the Year 2021. We're delighted to have her here with us. And she says that renovating such a tiny home made her really passionate about maximising those small spaces. Her Instagram is @workerscottage, and it's just full of tips, making the most of the room you have. She's got invaluable design advice there and some lovely baking videos. I'm also really looking forward to hearing Carol's tips on what trends we should look out for this season. Now, when Carol isn't writing her design and interiors column for our home magazine, she's styling interiors with a specialisation in styling for the camera. Her Instagram handle, which I love, it's a reference to how playing house was her favourite game as a child, and still is.
Thanks, Esther, and welcome to our home section. And we're joined today by Jen Sheahan, the winner of RTE Home of the Year 2021, and Carol O'Callaghan, the Irish Examiner Interiors columnist and long-time interior stylist. Welcome, Jen and Carol. And we all fell in love with your lovely artisan cottage, Jen. And tell us how you transformed it literally from a hole in the ground to the gorgeous home it is now.
Thanks very much. It was a total transformation. So when I bought it, it was a single story. There was no central heating. So there was one gigantic chimney breast down the middle of the house that was taking up probably about a quarter of the whole floor space. And then there was one little bathroom out the back. So I lived in it for about 9 months, 9 pretty uncomfortable months where the shower wasn't working and there was no hot water. And then when I renovated it, it was, complete transformation. Gutted the whole thing. I remember going to check on the progress maybe a couple of weeks into into the build, and I opened up the front door and I just got such a shock because there was nothing, just, you know, blue skies straight ahead of me. So yeah, it was really extensive. We had to dig up the floor so that we could drop it, so that I could add on that second story that has the main bedroom and bathroom upstairs. And then got rid of that big chimney breast in the middle because we were able to put in heating, functioning heating this time. And then it was a lot of planning to make sure I could fit in everything I wanted. So I had a really good architect, Dennis Gilbert. He actually lives in one of the cottages in the same neighbourhood as I do.
Because you had wanted to live there for quite a while.
Yeah, I'd been looking for over a year. I fell in love with one of them, and I was bidding on it, and it went out of budget, unfortunately. And then I stuck with it, and a whole year later, up came my one.
Yes. And tell us exactly how you kind of created a lot of space. You kind of conjured up an awful lot of extra room where there wasn't any.
Yeah.
That was kind of through clever storage, wasn't it?
Yeah, storage is the main thing. I think the first thing to really think about is how are you going to use the space? What do you actually want to use it for? Because if you come at it thinking, I need to put in as much storage as possible and I need all these different, you know, bedrooms and rooms for this and rooms for that, you can end up kind of maybe shoehorning things in that you don't ultimately actually need. And if you make space and if you put in storage, then you'll fill it with stuff that you might not actually need. So I think the main thing is thinking about how you're actually going to use it, what you actually want, what your deal breakers are, and then what you're either going to have to double up on or let go of. So, for example, my absolute non-negotiable that I really wanted was a bath. Bit of a tall order for such a tiny bathroom, but we got it in. Whereas there are certain things I didn't really mind not having. For example, a second bedroom, I was okay with that
right.
being.
You were able to sacrifice that.
Yeah,
trade-off.
It's a trade-off.
Yes. And Carol, you kind of through your work and your writing, that's a kind of a big thing with you, the decluttering aspect of creating more space kind of in small areas.
It is. I mean, small areas are very challenging, particularly for maybe a first-time buyer as well. You're doing everything from scratch. You probably have no experience before, or maybe you've seen family or friends do it. But like you said, it's using every square centimetre to the maximum. It's making sure you have storage for all the things you use day to day. There's no point of putting in a walk-in wardrobe if you're not going to fill it, but you do need somewhere to put the Hoover. And I know you were very clever. You put your Hoover under your banquette seating, didn't you, in the dining room? You did. And you've managed to do all that. You fitted everything in without making the space in any way oppressive. And that's quite an achievement. And of course, you've done it with spectacular colour choices. I mean, I think you've become Ireland's poster girl for how to use colour in small spaces. Because colour can overwhelm a space. I think in particular you've done it extremely well in your open plan kitchen sitting dining, which is a small space really compared to some of the cavernous barns of open plan living we have nowadays attached to larger homes. I think there would be three things I would say, to our viewers watching in this evening, if they're looking to introduce colour into their home, particularly a very, very small space, to pay attention to what you did in the kitchen. I think your decision not to have wall cabinets made a big difference. It opens up the space completely. You have your white walls. The white walls bounce the light off, coming in from outside, and just adds to that airy feeling. And it's the airiness that seems to expand when you have no space to actually expand into. But those units, the darker units, keeping them under the kitchen counter. I think if you had those dark units on the wall, they might just be coming at you a bit. Yeah. So I think you've done that really well. Matching in the banquette seating, there's a lovely cohesive feel to it all, and it's all under kitchen counter top height. So that's very effective. And I think then you've added in a zing with your gorgeous sofa. It's that mellow sunshine yellow, and it brings an extra dimension into the whole arrangement. And it also helps to separate you from the kitchen dining function, which is much more practical. It almost separates out your living area, and that's very, very well done. But I have to say, the thing I absolutely fell in love with your house was the downstairs bathroom. And I think that's the place where you can break all the rules. I think you adhere to the rules in the open plan arrangement, and you have to, because those are very functional spaces, and it's also your living space, and it's the space where you're spending most of the time. But in somewhere like a downstairs bathroom, that's where you can have fun with colour. You can go crazy, you can indulge and experiment to your heart's content. And I love the way you've used that. It's like a rich
crushed berry, raspberry. It's a gorgeous tone, and you've picked it up in the terrazzo on the wall tiles.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's very novel because terrazzo is something we associate with floors. So to have that effect on the wall, it's really fun, and it adds to your disco element with your disco ball on the ceiling. But I have to say, I really covet your pink sink. You'll have to tell me where you got it later, okay?
I'll send you the link.
It's absolutely gorgeous. But I think I would say to anybody, if you're looking to experiment with colour and you're a bit scared and you're afraid of making mistakes, do it in a small space like, the downstairs loo under the stairs where you might have a tiny basin and a toilet bowl. Or if you have a bigger bathroom like you have, try it there as well. Because let's face it, how much time do we spend in a bathroom every day? It's minutes. It's not such an important space. Have fun, I would say.
But remember, you said try, looking at a disco ball and being in a bad mood. That was your whole idea at the beginning, to create a kind of an area. Yeah, it was to create a zone that would kind of uplift you, So that was your whole idea, wasn't it? With the small, tiny area.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right, Carol. It is a really small space, and it's a very immersive space. So, because I've gotten a few questions from people since saying, did you paint the back of your door? Did you paint your ceiling? And I painted everything. There isn't anything in that bathroom that is, that is white or that is pale or that is anything. Everything is covered because you want that really small enclosed space to do what it can do, which is to be a very immersive, almost mood transformational experience. Hence the disco ball.
And another, that is your favourite space in the house, is it? Or do you have any other little spot?
I change my mind every time someone asks me this question.
What's your favourite space at the moment?
At the moment, I'm loving the garden because what a summer we've had. So I've really enjoyed that garden. I have some plants out in my back wall that I have not murdered this summer, which is probably one of my greatest achievements to date, I think. And I have that fold-down table, so I've had lots of nice garden parties and been able to use it then for lying out when it's been sunny. So I really enjoyed that. And summer is kind of still going, right? It's still really good weather.
It is.
And if money were no object, what would you splurge on?
Swimming pool.
Swimming pool.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Where would you put it?
I don't know. We barely got a bath in, so I'm not certain where I'd put a swimming pool, but ideally I'd put a swimming pool in. Yeah.
I think you need a -1 floor. That's the passion now. Dig out underground.
That's the next challenge.
Yeah. Well, I may as well put a cinema in then while I'm at that.
And a gym.
And a gym, why not?
And just other storage ideas in the kitchen. I remember you speaking about the joinery, and also you kind of looked up as well when it came to adding kind of storage. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the kitchen is clever. I'm really happy with the layout there. And Carol, you're right. I was really adamant that I didn't want any overhead cabinets above that main worktop area where the hob is, because it can feel. I think one of the reasons it doesn't feel so cramped in there at the moment is that there's that free eye line as you're looking around the whole space. There's nothing, there's nothing coming out at eye level. It's all at waist down level. So, but that was obviously a big trade-off then, because that's a huge storage area and that stuff had to go somewhere. So the whole back wall is a really tall floor-to-ceiling cabinets, and I think that space above the top cabinets, there's usually a gap, isn't there, between your top cabinets and your ceiling, and that's a bit of a waste of space. So a lot of the stuff that I don't use that frequently and that I do need to stand on a chair on to get out is up there, but it's still really, really useful storage. And then one of my favourite things that I have in the kitchen, I'm always amazed by how much gets in there. There's a tiny, tiny press all the way over against the wall, between the fridge and the wall, that could have easily been panelled over. It's only 10 centimetres wide and it is full of stuff. So any kind of slim vertical spaces that you have left over, I think, can be really useful as well. Yeah. And then what I've seen recently, and I don't have it myself, but I think it could be really useful, is using that kickboard. So I've seen people put things like baking trays or other flat things in there. Yes. And that's all, useful space as well. So I think that's really clever.
Brilliant. And of course, all your cookbooks, they were among the must-haves when you were making up your list of what I want to keep and what I definitely want in this small space and what I don't want, because you've kind of cleverly incorporated them under your kitchen counter, isn't it?
Yeah, they're on the back of the kitchen peninsula. So I collect a lot of cookbooks. I don't always read or follow a lot of them, but I do collect a lot of them. And that's another thing as well, I think, with storage. So that bookshelf that's on the back of the island, and then also I have a glassware shelving, open shelving at the end of the peninsula as well. Storage can also can double up as something really pretty and attractive. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you shove out of height. I think if people are looking at their own kitchens and thinking that they don't necessarily want those overhead cabinets, open shelving can be really nice. That can bring in that effect of keeping that view line less interrupted, let's say, as something that's closed over.
And you can have your nicer things on display as well for people to see, and you can enjoy seeing them. And it's practical because it's storage too.
Exactly. Like glassware is lovely. It looks really pretty, you know, especially if you've maybe lighting behind it or something like that. Or you've got a nice teapot or just a mix of things. It can look lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
And Carol, could you give us an idea of the kind of a few trends that you see kind of coming up this year?
Well, you know, I think the trends are interesting in that they're less about looks and products you go out and buy. And to me, they're more about feelings, the things that are coming in. And there are three for me that stand out. I think the first one for the rest of this year and going into 2022 would be simplicity. I think in the last 18 months, with such a changed world, we've become much more appreciative of the simple things in life. And we're seeing this reflected in interiors. And there's a new trend called Japandi. And basically what it is it blends the Japanese interior aesthetic, which is very pale and warm but pale, with the Scandinavian look, that lovely pared back chic look. So you've got Japan, you've got Scandi, it gives you Japandi. I think that's a really nice one to look out for. Again, it's one that could, if you're a bit fearful of colour, it's one that could work very well in a small space. My second one is, I'm going to use the word cocooning. I know it's taken on a new meaning in Ireland in the last year, but if I could bring it back to interiors for a minute and talk about cocooning in a cosy way. Now, I know we're coming into winter and, you know, we all want to be cozy. We all want to cocoon. We want our throws and our rugs and our scented candles and all of that. But it's also feeding into a look called broken plan living. You know, these huge, huge open plan rooms that we have on so many houses now. People have seen the need to try and break them down a little bit, not to put in dividing walls, but to put in some features, style them in a way that you create little zones. So we're seeing from the floor up things like open plan shelving, just dividing the space a little bit, folding screens, doing the same thing. We're seeing it from the ceiling downwards in pendant lighting, just creating a little bit of a shield and just making the space a bit more cosy as we go into the next year. I think we all have a greater appreciation of the coziness of our home and the safety of and security of it over the last year and a half. And I suppose the final one is nostalgia. You know, we used to look at nostalgia as being something 20, 40, 60 years ago, but nostalgia has become something very recent. You know, we're missing things we did in 2019, and that's only 2 years ago. You know, the simple pleasures of booking a flight and going somewhere for the weekend. You know, you have to stop and think before you go anywhere, before you do anything. And I think it's made us use what we have in our homes more as well. You know, the shops were shut for so much of last year and early this year. We started using what we had. We started getting out Granny's old china, the salad bowl our aunt gave us. We saw it really coming in last Christmas. Is it okay to say Christmas in September?
Definitely.
Is that all right?
You can say Christmas anytime. You can use the word anytime.
We saw it last Christmas with a new trend in decorations. You know, the traditional Christmas tree, the red, the green, the gold, the brass. We saw the old-fashioned sort of metallic, fragile baubles to put on the Christmas tree, the snow globes, the little drummer boys. All those little ornaments came back in. And it's part of that whole thing of connecting with the past. It's become so important. Connections with the past, connections with one another. And it's lovely to see these things feeding into interior trends now. Yeah, and they've become our trends rather than go out and buy a green rug or go out and buy, you know, a purple sofa. So, as I say, more feelings than products.
So thank you very much, Carol, and thank you, Jen. Thank you both for being with us today. And back to you now, Esther.
Thanks to Eve, thanks to Jen, and thank you to Carol. And is it just me, or is everyone going to go looking at their kickboards now? And we, of course, have to say thank you again to our event partner, AIB. And, of course, Easy Living, a huge thanks. They'd styled our sets so beautifully today. And don't forget to check out the Irish Examiner's Instagram page, where we will be announcing the winner of the fantastic €500 Easy Living gift card. Thank you for joining us. I'm Esther McCarthy. Good evening.